March 10, 2024. Jiudian Middle School, Handan, China. A 13-year-old boy leaves home to meet his classmates. Security footage captures him sitting on the back of a scooter, surrounded by 3 other boys. Within hours, he would be dead, beaten with a shovel, his face disfigured beyond recognition, and buried in a shallow grave that his killers had dug the day before. This wasn't a sudden act of violence. It was premeditated murder by 3 teenagers who had bullied their victim for months. This is the story of the Handan school murder. Handan City in China's northern Hebei province. A sprawling urban center home to over 9 million people, where rapid modernization meets rural poverty, where millions of parents leave their children behind to find work in distant cities. It was here, in the Feixiang district, that a crime so shocking would occur, it would force China to confront its hidden crisis of 67 million left-behind children. Jiudian Middle School appeared ordinary from the outside. Students in uniforms, teachers maintaining discipline, grandparents waiting at the gates. But beneath this facade of normalcy, a toxic dynamic was festering. 3 boys, Zhang, Li, and Ma, had targeted their classmate Wang for months. What began as typical schoolyard bullying, demanding money, locking him in sheds, psychological torment, would escalate to murder. The case would test China's newly lowered age of criminal responsibility, spark nationwide debates about juvenile crime, and expose the devastating consequences of a generation of children growing up without their parents. By the time police arrested the 3 suspects on March 11th, the damage was irreversible. A 13-year-old boy was dead, 3 young lives were destroyed, and a nation was forced to reckon with its most vulnerable population. Wang was one of China's 67 million left-behind children, kids living in rural areas with elderly relatives, while their parents work hundreds of miles away in factories and cities. His father labored in a coastal province, returning home only during holidays. Wang lived with his grandparents, who loved him but couldn't provide the guidance and protection a teenager needs. At 13, Wang was a 7th grader, struggling with more than just academics. His aunt would later recall that he'd become increasingly reluctant to go to school. He would ask his grandfather for cash before leaving each morning. They assumed he wanted snacks, never imagining he was being extorted by classmates. He once posted on social media about having suicidal thoughts. His aunt, thinking it was academic pressure, told him not to worry about grades. A classmate revealed to state media that Wang was repeatedly locked in a shed during bathroom breaks by Zhang, Li, and Ma. He once passed a note to the student in front of him, saying he didn't want to go to class anymore. He wanted to die. These were cries for help that went unheard in a system overwhelmed by millions of vulnerable children. On March 10th, Wang left home around 3 p.m. to meet his classmates. Security footage from a store by the school gate captured him sitting on the back of a scooter with the 3 boys who would kill him. He looked like any other teenager hanging out with friends. Within an hour, he would be dead. Zhang, Li, and Ma were also left-behind children, aged 12 to 13. Like Wang, they lived with grandparents while their parents worked in distant cities. But unlike Wang, they had formed a pact, with Zhang as the alpha, Li as his enforcer, and Ma as the follower. Zhang, identified by the court as the principal attacker, displayed traits that experts would later identify as antisocial personality disorder. He conceived the murder plan, wielded the shovel that killed Wang, and orchestrated the cover-up. His home was just 100 meters from the abandoned greenhouse where they would bury the body. Li, the main accomplice, actively participated in the beating and helped bury Wang's body. Court documents would later describe his methods as particularly cruel and heinous. Ma, the youngest and most passive of the three, followed them to the murder site. He watched, but didn't participate, a bystander to horror who did nothing to stop it. What transforms bullies into killers? Experts point to a toxic combination of factors: absent parents, overwhelmed guardians, normalized violence, and a school system that fails to identify warning signs. Studies show left-behind children are more likely to experience mental health issues, become victims of violence, and engage in criminal behavior. In this case, all these risk factors converged with deadly consequences. The security camera footage from 3 p.m. shows Wang alive, sitting on the scooter with his soon-to-be killers. By 4:10 p.m., all the money in his WeChat wallet, 191 yuan, about $26, had been transferred to one of the suspect's accounts. His phone was then turned off, cutting his last connection to the outside world. The boys led Wang to an abandoned vegetable greenhouse in Zhang village, over 10 kilometers from his home. This wasn't a random location. The dilapidated structure, surrounded by dry weeds and hidden from view, had been carefully selected. More chillingly, Zhang, Li, and Ma had visited the site twice before, digging a pit that would serve as Wang's grave. The premeditation is what makes this crime particularly horrifying. These weren't teenagers who lost control in a moment of rage. They planned, prepared, and executed a murder with the calculated precision of adults. The pit they dug was 0.56 meters deep, shallow, but deep enough to hide a body. They brought a shovel, the murder weapon. They chose a time when no one would be around. They thought of everything, except one crucial detail. People would look for Wang. What happened in that abandoned greenhouse was reconstructed through forensic evidence and the suspect's confessions. Zhang struck Wang repeatedly with the shovel, targeting his head and face. The autopsy revealed injuries to Wang's head, face, and back. His face was so severely damaged that his uncle, who identified the body, said it was disfigured beyond recognition. Li joined in the attack, participating in what prosecutors would call methods that were particularly cruel. The exact details of Wang's final moments are too disturbing to fully recount, but forensic evidence showed he suffered extensive trauma before death. Ma stood and watched, neither participating nor intervening, a silent witness to murder. After Wang was dead, the 3 boys dragged his body to the pre-dug pit and buried him. They covered the grave with debris, trying to hide their crime. Then they went home to their grandparents, ate dinner, and went to bed as if nothing had happened. But Wang's father, working hundreds of miles away, had received word that his son was missing. He was already racing home, checking his son's social media for clues. When Wang didn't return home, his grandparents initially weren't alarmed. Teenagers sometimes stay out late. But when he didn't come back that night, they contacted his father, who immediately sensed something was wrong. Checking his son's WeChat account, he discovered the money transfer to one of the classmates at 4:10 p.m., right before the phone went dead. The next morning, March 11th, police arrived at Jiudian Middle School. They questioned Zhang, Li, and Ma, who initially denied seeing Wang. But under interrogation, their story crumbled. One of them, reports suggest it was Ma, broke down and led police to the abandoned greenhouse. A team of 60 investigators descended on the scene. What they found confirmed every parent's worst nightmare. Wang's body was buried in the shallow pit, exactly where the suspects had indicated. The autopsy that followed took over an hour, cataloging the extensive injuries. Director Li Yafeng of the local police confirmed the murder had been premeditated, with the suspects digging the grave on 2 separate occasions before the killing. This murder exposed a crisis affecting 67 million Chinese children. The left behind phenomenon is a direct result of China's economic model. Hundreds of millions of rural residents migrate to cities for work, but can't bring their children due to the hukou system, which ties social benefits to birthplace registration. These children see their parents perhaps once or twice a year during holidays. They're raised by grandparents who often lack education and struggle to provide emotional support or recognize psychological problems. Studies paint a devastating picture. 90% suffer emotional abuse, 65% experience physical violence, and 30% report sexual abuse. They have higher rates of depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. Between 2020 and 2023, prosecutors charged 243,000 minors with crimes, with an average increase of 5% per year. Experts link this rise directly to the left-behind children crisis. When children grow up without consistent parental guidance, witnessing or experiencing violence, and feeling abandoned, some internalize the pain, while others externalize it through aggression. This case tested China's new criminal law. In 2021, China lowered the age of criminal responsibility from 14 to 12 for serious crimes like intentional homicide, but only with approval from the Supreme People's Procuratorate. Zhang, Li, and Ma, all aged 12 to 13, became among the first to be prosecuted under this new provision. In December 2024, 9 months after the murder, the Handan court delivered its verdict. Zhang received life imprisonment for planning and executing the murder. Li got 12 years for his role as accomplice. Ma, who only witnessed the crime, received special correctional education, a form of juvenile rehabilitation. The court emphasized that the methods were particularly cruel and particularly heinous. The sentences sparked nationwide debate. Many on social media demanded the death penalty, despite Chinese law exempting minors. Others argued that children who commit adult crimes deserve adult punishment. Legal experts noted this case would set precedent for how China handles juvenile violence in the future. The Handan school murder forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about modern society. 3 young boys, abandoned by the economic system that took their parents away, bullied and ultimately murdered a classmate who shared their same abandonment. Wang died not just from violence, but from systemic neglect. Warning signs ignored, cries for help unheard, protection systems that failed. His last image, captured on security camera sitting on a scooter with his killers, haunts China's conscience. He was failed by his school that didn't recognize severe bullying, by a society that normalizes parental absence, and ultimately by 3 boys who chose violence over humanity. Prevention requires addressing root causes, reforming the hukou system that separates families, improving mental health resources in rural schools, training teachers to recognize warning signs, and creating support systems for vulnerable children. Until then, China's 67 million left-behind children remain at risk. Remember Wang, a 13-year-old boy who wanted to die rather than face his tormentors, who got his wish in the cruelest way possible. His death must not be in vain. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Juvenile Files for more international crime documentaries. Comments are open for respectful discussion about preventing youth violence and supporting vulnerable children. If you or someone you know is experiencing bullying or having suicidal thoughts, please reach out for help immediately. Your life matters.